I was 30 years old and shared a two-story house with my sister Emma. It was a mother-daughter style home, meaning it had two kitchens. Emma took the downstairs, and I lived upstairs. She wasn't home often because she spent most of her time at her boyfriend's place, which was about 20 miles away. One night, I was home alone, sitting in my living room watching a scary movie. My part of the house had an open layout, so the living room, dining room, and kitchen were all one big space. My couch was in the middle of the room, which meant my back was to a large, dark area behind me. I'll admit, even at 30, I found myself glancing over my shoulder more than once. After the movie, I brushed my teeth, turned off all the lights, and went to bed. I woke up around 1 a.m., unsure why at first. Then I heard a voice downstairs. It sounded like Emma. She wasn't calling from outside. It sounded like she was inside the house. Groggy and confused, I got out of bed and walked into the pitch-black hallway. I turned on the lights and went to the stairs, hearing her voice again. This time, I could make out my name. I called out, "What is it?" as I walked downstairs. The foyer was dark and I couldn't find the light switch. I stumbled into Emma's kitchen, flicked on the light, and saw that her apartment was empty. No Emma, no boyfriend. I checked her bedroom, but it was empty too. As I called her name loudly, I heard something drop in her bedroom, the same room I had just checked. I bolted back upstairs, locked myself in my room, and tried calling Emma. She didn't answer. Eventually, I fell asleep. The next morning, I woke up to a text from her asking why I'd called her at 1 a.m. I asked if she'd been home, and she said no. She'd been at her boyfriend's. I went downstairs to check her bedroom, but there was nothing on the floor that could have made that noise. I told myself I must have hallucinated it all, but the vividness of her voice and the sound in her room still haunt me. When I was 14, I was home alone one weekend night. My mom, a single parent, was working an overnight shift as an RN, and my older brother was away at college. I had a girl named Lily over earlier that evening, but she left around 10 p.m. because her parents didn't like her staying out late. I was in my bedroom, which was upstairs and overlooked the backyard. I was watching TV in bed when I heard a chair scrape across the deck outside. I got up and looked out the window, expecting to see Lily. Instead, I saw a man sitting in one of the deck chairs, looking up at me. I pulled away from the window, terrified. I texted a few friends to see if it was one of them playing a prank, but they all said no. Scared but curious, I looked out the window again. He was still there, staring right at me. I turned off the TV and sat in bed, too scared to move. After a few minutes, I worked up the courage to ask, "What do you want?" His shoulders started shaking like he was laughing, but I didn't hear any sound at first, just a faint wheezing. I told him to leave and walked away from the window. A few moments later, I heard the back door being pushed. He was trying to get inside. I ran to the top of the stairs and listened as he tried the front door too. Thankfully, he gave up after a few attempts. I didn't leave my room until my mom got home the next morning. When I told her what happened, she was furious I hadn't called the police. Looking back, I realize how lucky I was. When I was 10, my family of 5, my parents, my 14-year-old brother, my 5-year-old sister, and I, lived in a quiet suburban home. One Friday night, my brother was out with friends when my parents got a call from the hospital. He'd been hit by a car and had a broken leg. My parents rushed to the hospital, taking my little sister with them. They asked if I was okay staying home alone, and I said yes. I was worried about my brother but didn't want to see him in pain. I stayed in my room playing a Star Wars video game for a couple of hours. Around midnight, I heard the front door open. I turned off the TV and crawled into bed with my Game Boy, expecting to hear my parents' voices. But there was only silence. I crept to my door and peeked out. The living room was dark, but I could see 3 tall figures standing there. They weren't my family. I quietly shut my door and hid in my closet, burying myself behind boxes and bags of clothes. A few moments later, my bedroom door opened. I heard footsteps approach my bed, then the closet door. My heart was pounding as the door creaked open. I held my breath, not moving a muscle. The door stayed open for what felt like an eternity before it finally closed. I stayed hidden until I heard my parents return. The intruders had stolen some valuables, but thankfully, they hadn't found me. To this day, I wonder if the person who opened the closet saw me hiding there. When I was a teenager, my parents went on a week-long trip, leaving me home alone. Our house was in a quiet area with woods in the backyard. One Thursday night in July, I was on the deck smoking weed and listening to music when I heard a voice calling from the woods. At first, I thought it was kids playing, but the voice grew more urgent. "Hey, over here, we need help." I called back, asking who it was, but the voice just repeated, "Please, come help." I walked halfway to the woods, but stopped when I got a bad feeling. I backed up to the deck and went inside, locking all the doors. A little later, I heard splashing in the backyard. I looked out the window and saw a man hiding behind the pool. He laughed and said, "I see you." I closed the blinds and tried to ignore him, but he started banging on the window, screaming, "Help!" I screamed back, threatening to call the police, and he eventually left. I still wonder if I would have handled it differently if I hadn't been high.